Hello, this is Author Gencer from the ABN, and today we will be doing a special report. Today we will be taking a look at one of the most historically rich nations on Earth, China. More specifically, during the age of new imperialism. We'll take a look at who controlled it, life as a native, the impact of the countries involved, resistance to rule, and nation building and post-imperial rule. Let's begin. For decades even, prior to the age of new imperialism, numerous European powers were already obtaining concessions from China. America, Great Britain, Portugal, and France all already were in possession of one or more concessions in China prior to 1870. As the age of new imperialism got into full swing, new powers also obtained concessions, and already present powers expanded their holdings. The vast majority of European holdings were concentrated in the north and south of China's coastline. In the north, a high concentration in Beijing and Tianjin, including most famously the Beijing or Peking legation quarter. In the south, the majority of the holdings were concentrated around Hong Kong, Macau, and the Greater Guangdong area. Notable holdings outside of these two hotspots include Russian and Japanese holdings in Port Arthur and Manchuria, as well as French holdings in Wuhan, and various European powers holding small bits of territory along the coastline. Beyond direct territory, there was also economic spheres of influence that were carved on Chinese territory. Manchuria was in a heated contest between Russia and Japan. Shanxi, Mongolia, and inland northern China was under Russian influence. The Shandong Peninsula had significant German influence. Britain had strong influence around Canton, Tibet, and the Yangtze River area, and coastal areas near Taiwan were under Japanese influence. Then there was France, with significant influence in the southern areas of China around Yunnan and its border regions with French Indochina. It was these powers that mainly held control in China. Life as a native. Life as a native was very hard under these conditions. As a result of trade with the British and the two opium wars, there was a massive opioid addiction epidemic in the country, ravaged by rebellion and economic decay. As China's power was declining, so was its economy, and thus the standard of living of its people. The local Chinese also faced amounts of discrimination, although not to the same extent the native populations in Africa and India suffered. Needless to say, life as a native Chinese during this period was not easy. There were many countries involved in China, other than China itself, obviously. You had Russia, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, America, and via a small enclave in Tianjin, even a newly formed Italy. However, of these countries, only Russia, Japan, Britain, and France were really relevant. The impact it had on China cannot be described as anything short of disastrous. China had practically spent the past 2,000 years as the undisputed power in all of East Asia. What these European powers had done was piece by piece disassemble all of China's geopolitical strength and then in turn impose its own influence and rule on China. Now, the European powers had many other colonies outside of China, most notably in India and Africa. From an economic standpoint, control of these Chinese concessions was obviously a benefit, but did not make much of a large difference in the economy of the powers. Instead, it was geopolitical and nationalistic forces that gave these Chinese concessions their value. Since one European power controlled land in China, they all wanted to, as to not be behind their rivals. A great example of this is how during the Boxer Rebellion, all the nations present in the Beijing legation quarter voted on whether to evacuate the city or to hold strong and wait for reinforcements. Every nation except for Britain voted to leave the city, but once Britain voted to stay, every other nation present also felt pressured to stay. Resistance to rule. Two major rebellions against this status quo occurred in China. I'll start with the Neon Rebellion, which lasted from 1851 to 1868. The rebelling army numbered approximately 40,000 strong. The rebellion occurred for many of the same reasons the Boxer Rebellion occurred decades later. Societal decay, natural disasters plaguing the countryside, economic hardship, and anger at how China failed to protect itself from Western imperialism. The Neon Rebellion was only barely put down. The Qing struggled immensely with it, as most of their funds had gone into fighting the Opium Wars with Britain. Then, rather famously, there was the Boxer Rebellion, which lasted from 1899 to 1901. 230 foreigners and Chinese Christians were killed in the uprising. At the international legation in Beijing legation quarter, there were a total of 8 nations represented there: Great Britain, America, Russia, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and Austria-Hungary.
As mentioned before, all of the nations present in the Beijing legation quarter voted on whether to evacuate the city or hold it strong and wait for reinforcements. Every nation except for Britain voted to leave the city, but once Britain voted to stay, as mentioned before, every other nation felt pressured to stay, and so they did. The Empress of China herself reluctantly agreed to support the rebels and formally declared war on all European powers present in China. However, the 8-nation legation forces managed to hold out until reinforcements arrived. In the end, all rebellions against Western powers and Japan failed. There was plenty of resistance to foreign rule, but no success in said resistance. Nation building post-imperial rule. In the aftermath of imperial rule, China fell into a brutal civil war. Throughout Chinese history, China has had periods of unity and strength, followed by fracture and weakness. China had entered another warlord period. However, I cannot fully say post-imperial without mentioning a few things. Even after overall European imperialism eventually left, Britain held on to Hong Kong until 1997 and Portugal onto Macau until 1999. However, it was not really nation building that occurred after imperial rule, but rather nation crumbling. This has been a special report on China by Arthur Gencer at the ABN. Thank you for watching.